Before we begin tonight's story, I want to speak directly to you, the one listening right now. Take a slow breath in and a long breath out. Let yourself settle for a moment, because what you're about to hear is not just a bedtime tale. It is a tool, a practice, a gentle reprogramming of your subconscious mind. The words, the rhythm, the pauses you will hear are designed not only to help you drift into deep rest, but also to shift the way you think about prosperity, the way you allow abundance into your life. This story is inspired by the teachings of Abraham Hicks, and if you are familiar with their guidance, you know the truth they repeat over and over. What you attract is never about effort. It is never about chasing. It is about alignment. It is about how you feel in this moment, what vibration you hold as you breathe, as you rest, as you allow. And so this story has been woven with their teachings hidden inside the narrative, not in a lecture, not in instructions, but in symbols, images, and moments that your conscious mind may not even notice, but your subconscious will absorb deeply. That is why I invite you now to stay with me until the very end of this journey. Because each moment, each detail, will soften your mind a little more, will open your heart a little wider, will tune your vibration a little higher. And while you sleep, the story will keep working inside you, quietly planting seeds of wealth, of clarity, of ease. But before we start, I have a small request for you. If you feel connected to this channel, if you believe you are ready to let abundance flow into your life, I ask you to subscribe and to write in the comments, "I allow." Not because I need it, but because you do. When you type those words, you are sending a signal, a declaration, not only to yourself, but to the universe. I allow. I allow prosperity. I allow peace. I allow myself to rest and to receive. And as Abraham Hicks reminds us, when you decide and allow, the universe responds. Always. So let us begin. Let us move together into the story of the house that breathed silence. A story that is not only about a woman in a quiet home on a hill, but about you, about the invisible stream that is always flowing around you, waiting only for you to notice and to step inside. Close your eyes if you wish, breathe slowly, and let the journey carry you. Far away, beyond the noise of markets and the restless sound of footsteps, there was a hill, and on the top of that hill stood a small house made of pale stone and dark wood. It was not larger than any other, nor decorated with treasures, yet people who passed by always paused, because something about the house felt alive. Even with its windows closed, it seemed to breathe. The roof, still and unmoving, felt as though it expanded and contracted with the rhythm of an unseen heart. The villagers called it the house that breathed silence. Inside that house lived a woman named Ilara. She was not famous, she was not wealthy, she was not known for possessions. And yet, everyone who visited her carried something back that could not be touched, something invisible but undeniable. In her presence, people felt lighter, as though the heavy stones they had carried inside their minds for years had finally been set down. They could not explain it, and she never tried to. Ilara herself would only smile softly when asked about her secret, but she knew the truth. She knew that the house was not magical, nor was she. The calmness that people felt was the same calmness that always exists, always waiting like a stream running quietly under the surface of the earth. Most people are too hurried to notice it, too busy to hear it. But when they entered her house, they slowed down, and in slowing down, they aligned with what had always been there. And here, dear listener, is where the teaching of Abraham Hicks enters again. The stream of well-being is constant, always flowing, never pausing. You do not need to create it. You only need to notice it, and then allow yourself to float. This is what Ilara had discovered. She lived as if the stream was her companion, as if every breath, every step, every simple act of being was guided by it. And so her home breathed, because she allowed it to. Tonight, as you listen, imagine yourself walking up that hill, approaching that quiet house, feeling its rhythm even from afar. Notice how your own breath begins to slow, how your shoulders soften, how the silence grows not empty, but full. The story is not about someone else. It is about you, for the same stream flows around you now, waiting for you to step inside, waiting for you to allow. I wake before the village stirs, before the first sound of carts rolling over stone or doors opening to the day. The house is still, and yet it breathes with me. Sometimes I place my hand on the wall and I feel it rise and fall, not in truth, but in spirit, as though it too knows the rhythm of allowing. I walk slowly to the central room, and there it waits, the crystal bowl on the wooden table, empty to the eyes, full to me. When I sit before it, I do not ask, I do not plead, I do not bargain with the universe. I listen not with my ears, but with my skin, with my breath, with the quiet place behind my eyes where thoughts dissolve. It is here that I remember what Abraham Hicks has taught. The current of well-being never stops. It is I who either flow with it or resist, and each morning I choose to float. I watch the light creep across the floorboards, inch by inch, and I let it remind me that everything comes in its time. I breathe. I release. And sometimes I smile, because I know that even as I sit here, the village below is already rearranging itself in answer to my vibration. Opportunities are moving, doors are opening, paths are clearing, though no one down there yet knows why. If you are listening to me now, perhaps you can feel it too. Perhaps you can imagine yourself sitting in my chair, the bowl before you, the silence alive. Perhaps you can sense the invisible threads weaving themselves around you, pulling closer the very things you thought were far away. I want you to know that nothing is missing, not for me, not for you. The moment you release the need to control, the current carries you, and so I sit, I breathe, I allow, and in that allowing, abundance flows toward me, not with noise, not with urgency, but with the quiet certainty of water finding its way back to the sea. One evening, as the sky turned amber and the village lights flickered on one by one, a traveler climbed the hill. His steps were heavy, his shoulders bent beneath invisible burdens, his eyes searching for rest. He had heard whispers of the house, the one that breathed, the one that seemed alive with silence, though he did not believe in such things. Still, his feet carried him forward, and when he reached the door, it opened without a knock. Ilara greeted him with nothing more than a nod, her presence calm, her eyes clear. She offered him no promises, no words of comfort, no explanation. Instead, she led him into the central room where the bowl of crystal rested quietly on the table. She gestured for him to sit, and he did, though uncertain of what would follow. At first, the traveler shifted in his seat, restless, waiting for a ritual, a prayer, perhaps a chant. But none came, only silence. Only the soft breath of the house itself, and slowly, without knowing why, his chest loosened, his shoulders lowered. His thoughts, once racing like wild horses, began to quiet. He placed his hands on his knees and felt them steady, no longer trembling with the weight of his journey. The narrator's voice comes to you now. Abraham Hicks teaches that you do not need effort to attract what you want. You need alignment. The traveler did not force this peace. He stumbled into it by allowing himself to sit, to listen, to soften. And just as he began to align, the stream of well-being began to carry him. When he finally lifted his eyes to meet Ilara's, he did not see a woman with answers, nor a magical house. He saw himself, lighter, clearer, stronger. And though no words were spoken, He understood that something within him had shifted. He had stepped into the current. The traveller woke before the sun had fully risen, though for a moment he was not sure if he was awake or still dreaming. The room was dim, a soft silver glow slipping through the thin curtains. He lay still for a while, his body heavy against the mattress, listening to the faint creaks of the wooden house, as if it too was stretching into the new day. His eyes blinked slowly, once, then again, adjusting to the pale light. He turned his head slightly to the right, noticing the shape of the wooden chair beside the bed, the fabric of his cloak folded neatly across its back. Placed there by hands he did not remember moving in the night. He lifted one hand from under the blanket, slowly, carefully, as though the air itself was heavy, and rested it against his chest. He could feel the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, slower than usual, calmer, as though it too had been softened by the silence of the house. He took in a breath, long and steady, the air cool at first as it entered his nostrils, then warming as it filled his lungs, and he let it go just as slowly, the exhale almost a sigh, almost a release. He repeated the breath again, noticing how his chest rose gently beneath his hand, how his shoulders lifted just a fraction before falling once more. When he finally sat up, he did so in stages. First he shifted one leg free from the blanket, the fabric slipping off his knee, pooling at his ankle. Then he pulled the other leg free, planting both feet firmly on the floorboards. The wood was cold under his soles, sending a shiver through his body, but it was not unpleasant. It was grounding, reminding him that he was here, in this house, in this moment. He rubbed his feet lightly against the wood, back and forth, as though testing its firmness, before reaching for his sandals. The sandals lay where he had left them, just beside the bed, one slightly angled outward, the other turned inward, as though they too had rested. He reached for the first, his fingers curling around the worn leather strap, feeling the texture of years embedded in its surface. He lifted it, placed it carefully against his foot, pressed his heel down slowly, adjusted the strap, then pulled the buckle tighter, not too tight, just enough so that it held firm. Then he reached for the second sandal and repeated the same sequence, fingers curling, lifting, placing, pressing, buckling. When he stood, he checked both feet, shifting his weight from one side to the other to make sure they fit evenly. He walked slowly across the room toward the small basin of water. Each step creaked the floorboards softly, the rhythm steady, one step, then another, then another. He reached the basin, dipped his hands into the cool water, lifted it in his palms, and splashed it against his face. The droplets ran down his cheeks, dripping onto his neck, falling onto the collar of his robe. He repeated the motion again, cupping, lifting, splashing, closing his eyes as the water touched his skin. He did it a third time, slower now, almost as if each drop carried away the remnants of yesterday. Then he reached for the cloth beside the basin, pressing it against his face. First the forehead, then the cheeks, then the chin, pressing, not rubbing, each movement careful and deliberate. When he lowered the cloth, he placed it neatly back on the hook, smoothing its edges so that it hung evenly, not bunched or crooked. He looked at it for a moment longer than necessary, as though confirming that it was perfectly aligned, before turning toward the window. He lifted the curtain just slightly, letting in a thin line of sunlight that stretched across the floorboards. Dust motes floated in the golden beam, dancing slowly, gently, without sound. He watched them drift for a long time, following their lazy movements, until he felt as though he too was drifting with them, weightless, suspended in air. At last, he turned back to the table where a simple loaf of bread waited, placed there by Alara the night before. He sat down, the chair legs scraping softly against the floor, and reached for the bread. His fingers pressed into its surface, breaking a piece. crumbs falling onto the wood. He lifted the piece to his mouth, chewed slowly, each bite deliberate, feeling the texture against his tongue, swallowing in silence. He took another piece, repeated the act, then another. He brushed the crumbs with his hand, gathering them into his palm, then scattering them gently onto the floor, almost as if planting seeds. As he sat there, eating slowly, moving slowly, breathing slowly, he realized that the house was still breathing with him, every creak, every whisper of air matching his own rhythm, and in that rhythm he felt no urgency, no pressure, no hunger for answers. He felt only alignment, and alignment was enough. The traveler rose slowly from the table, his hands pressing gently against the wooden surface as he pushed himself upward, the chair legs scraping faintly across the floor. He stood for a moment, still, adjusting the folds of his robe with careful movements, smoothing the fabric first on one side, then on the other, pulling the belt at his waist tighter, loosening it slightly, then tightening it again, until it felt just right. He placed both hands on the belt, checking its knot, satisfied only after repeating the touch 3 times. He turned toward the door, his sandals pressing softly against the floorboards. One step, then another, each step followed by a pause, as though even walking was a ritual. When he reached the door, he placed his hand on the handle, letting it rest there for a long moment before he pushed it down. The hinges groaned faintly, the sound stretching into the silence of the morning. He stepped out slowly, the air outside cooler than inside, brushing softly against his face, and he closed his eyes just to feel it more deeply. The sky above was pale, streaks of gold beginning to warm the horizon. He walked down the first few steps, his hand trailing along the wooden railing, his fingers moving slowly, tracing the grain of the wood, stopping here and there as if each line was a map he had to follow. He reached the path, narrow and uneven, and placed his foot carefully, testing the ground before shifting his weight forward, then placing the other foot, repeating this again and again, each step deliberate, each step certain. And here, dear listener, let me pause and ask you something. Are you still awake? Are your eyes open, your body alert, your mind following every detail? If you are, and if you feel energy still moving in you, I invite you to go to the comments and simply write, "Yes, I am still awake." That is your signal, your declaration that you are walking this journey with awareness, step by step, just like the traveler. But if you are not fully awake, if your eyelids are heavy, if your breath is slowing, if you are already floating towards sleep, then I invite you not to move, not to comment, not to do anything at all. Simply relax, let go, and drift deeper into the story. Because even as you rest, there is more to learn, more to receive, more to absorb. The teachings of Abraham Hicks remind us that your subconscious never sleeps. It listens, it records, it vibrates. So even if you drift now, the story continues to shape you, to soften you, to tune you toward abundance. The traveler kept walking down the hill, his sandals pressing against stones, small pebbles shifting beneath his weight, his balance steady, his body calm. Birds began to sing in the branches above, not loud, not urgent, just a gentle rhythm, a background melody to his steps. He paused to look at the sky once more, the light brighter now, the warmth slowly reaching the earth, and he breathed deeply, in and out, letting the morning settle into him. He smiled faintly, because he knew something had changed. Not in the village, not in the hill, not in the house, but in himself. And as he continued downward, he felt lighter, as though the current of well-being itself was carrying him, step by step, toward the life that was already waiting for him. The traveler continued his descent step by step, each foot pressing against the earth, the sound of pebbles shifting beneath his sandals. The path widened slowly, the grass thinning, the ground turning smoother, leading him back toward the village below. As he walked, he lifted his eyes to the rooftops, their red clay tiles catching the first light of morning, each tile glowing faintly as though warmed not only by the sun, but by something unseen. He paused at the edge of the hill, resting his hand against a wooden post, his fingers wrapping around the rough surface, feeling its grooves, its splinters, its history. He remained there for a moment, breathing, his eyes tracing the narrow streets below. When he finally stepped into the village, his pace slowed even more. The stones of the street were uneven, some raised, some sunken, and he placed each foot carefully, balancing his weight before shifting forward, cautious but steady. His robe brushed against his ankles with every step, the fabric swaying in rhythm with his walk. He looked from side to side, noticing the wooden shutters on the windows, some half open, some closed, the curtains inside swaying gently with the morning breeze. At the first corner, a baker stepped out of his shop, carrying a tray of bread still steaming. The scent drifted into the air, warm, comforting, wrapping itself around the traveler like a soft blanket. The baker looked at him, eyes narrowing for a moment in recognition, and without a word, he reached for one loaf, placed it in the traveler's hands, and smiled. The traveler bowed his head slightly, his lips curving into a faint smile in return, his fingers tightening around the loaf, feeling its warmth, its weight, its promise. He continued walking, holding the bread carefully as though it were precious, his other hand brushing against the walls of the houses as he passed, feeling the cool stone beneath his fingertips. A child ran across the street, pausing mid-step to glance at him, her eyes bright with curiosity, her laughter soft as she darted away again. An old woman, seated on a stool by her door, nodded as he passed, her gaze calm, her expression kind. The narrator's voice comes to you now. Abraham Hicks teaches that when you align, the world shifts around you. People respond differently. Opportunities appear without effort. Gestures of kindness flow toward you like water, following its natural path. The traveler did not ask for bread. He did not demand attention. He did not force connection. He simply aligned, and the village responded. As you listen, perhaps you can notice in your own life the small gestures, the simple moments that already carry abundance. A smile, a word, a gift, a door opening when you least expect it. These are not coincidences. They are the reflection of your vibration, the proof that the current of well-being is already flowing to you. The traveler walked on, the loaf of bread pressed gently against his chest, the warmth still lingering in his hands. His steps felt lighter now, his shoulders no longer bent but lifted, his breath steady, his mind clear. He did not need to know what would come next. He trusted that it was already on its way. The traveler continued along the narrow street, his sandals pressing softly against the uneven stones, each step slow, each step followed by a pause, as if even the ground itself was asking him to notice more. The bread was still warm in his hands, and he held it carefully against his chest, adjusting his grip now and then, his fingers pressing into the crust, then loosening again, pressing, then loosening, repeating the movement without hurry. He passed by a wooden door slightly ajar, and from inside came the sound of laughter, faint at first, then fading into silence, as though the village itself was waking gently. A few steps further, he saw a neighbor sweep the front of her home, the broom sliding back and forth, slow and steady, the dust lifting briefly before settling again. She looked up as he passed, her eyes soft, her lips curving into a small smile, and she nodded just once before returning to her sweeping. He continued on, his head bowing slightly in return, his own lips lifting gently, almost without effort. At the corner, a man carrying a basket of apples stopped, shifted the weight from one arm to the other, then reached into the basket and pulled out a single apple. He placed it in the traveler's free hand, pressing it firmly into his palm, his eyes meeting his for a brief moment, and then he walked on without a word. The traveler looked at the apple, its skin red, its surface smooth, and he held it carefully, the bread in one hand, the apple in the other, both gifts, both symbols, both reminders. He slowed his steps even more, the morning sun now higher, spreading warmth across the rooftops, spilling light onto the stones. He noticed how the shadows moved with him, long at first, then shortening, stretching and bending with each step. His breathing was steady, in through the nose, out through the mouth, repeating the rhythm again and again, the rise of his chest, the fall of his chest, each cycle quiet, each cycle calm. And here, dear listener, the narrator returns to you. Abraham Hicks teaches that the universe responds to vibration, not to words, not to struggle, not to force. The traveler was not chasing, he was not demanding, he was not even asking aloud. He was simply aligned, and in that alignment life began to respond. A loaf of bread, an apple, a smile, a gesture. These are the beginnings of abundance, the proof that the current is moving. As you listen, perhaps you too can notice in your life the small gifts that already arrive, the signs that you are being guided, the doors that open quietly without effort. And if you can notice them, and if you can appreciate them, more will come, always more, always flowing. The traveler stopped for a moment, placing both gifts against his chest, closing his eyes, breathing deeply, letting gratitude settle in. He opened his eyes slowly, turned his head left, then right, scanning the quiet street, the windows above, the rooftops beyond. He smiled again, faint but steady, and continued walking step after step, each step lighter than the one before, each step carrying him deeper into the stream of well-being. The traveler stopped at the edge of the village, his sandals resting on the last stone of the narrow street. He stood still for a long time, the bread in one hand, the apple in the other. His shoulders lifted slightly as he filled his lungs with the morning air, his breath slow, steady, unhurried. He closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun against his face, and he remained like this, unmoving, breathing, listening, until even the smallest sounds, the birds above, the brooms sweeping in the distance, the faint crackle of firewood, became part of the same quiet rhythm. He lowered his head, opened his eyes again, and looked at the gifts in his hands. Bread, apple, nothing more, and yet everything. And now, dear listener, the voice comes back to you, not to tell the story, but to remind you what it means. Abraham Hicks teaches that what you hold in your hands, in your life, in your heart, is always a reflection of the vibration you choose. Prosperity does not rush, it does not force, it flows, gently, steadily, like a stream moving around rocks, like the breath moving in and out of your body. Tonight, as you listen, your vibration is softening, rising, aligning. With every breath you take, you are stepping deeper into the current of well-being. Perhaps you can feel it now. Perhaps you can notice how your shoulders release just a little, how your chest feels lighter, how your thoughts begin to slow. You do not need to do more. You do not need to figure it out. You do not need to know how or when. You only need to allow. The universe is already rearranging itself for you, already guiding people, already opening doors, already preparing the gifts that will appear when you least expect them. So let these words settle into you. Let them sink below the surface of your mind, down into the quiet soil of your subconscious, where they can grow as you sleep. Tell yourself softly, I allow. I allow prosperity. I allow ease. I allow abundance. Repeat it gently in your mind, again and again, until the words blur into the rhythm of your breath. And now, let me ask you, are you still awake? Are your eyes open, following every word, your mind steady, your body alert? If so, I invite you to write in the comments, "Yes, I am still awake." That will be your signal, your declaration, your alignment with this journey. But if your eyelids are heavy, if your breath is slow, if you are already floating on the edge of sleep, then do nothing. Simply rest. Simply allow, let go of thought, let go of effort, let go of resistance. Let the story carry you further. Let your dreams be woven with prosperity. Let your night be filled with the stream of well-being. For prosperity is already yours. Abundance is already here. And tonight, as you drift deeper, the current is carrying you quietly, endlessly, into the life you were always meant to live.
If you're still awake, stay here with us. Open our special playlist now and keep listening to more sleep stories from mental reprogramming and prosperity. Listen to one, then another, until sleep gently arrives and carries you into the night. And if, by any chance, your eyes are still open, leave a comment with the words, "I'm awake so." I'll know you stayed with me until the very end. I'd also love to know, what did you think of this story? Share your thoughts and let's talk in the comments. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, may your dreams be filled with light, abundance, and peace. Good night and sweet dreams.